Yeah, let's do that. Okay, cool. Thanks, Sandra. I appreciate that. Yeah, just in the essence of time being somewhat limited in these fast sessions, which I can appreciate uh, if you're someone who's attending an event like this, it's understandable. That's okay. I appreciate it, Sandra. We will have a lot of fun here. I'm not a total stranger to the Toronto Jobs career events world, and my name is Mike Bird, as you can see on the slide, and I'm going to talk to you today about the idea of building a job search pipeline and using sales concepts more broadly to actually structure a job search and think about where to put your time and energy, because those are really the two most critical resources that you have and that you need to balance when you're actually going through a job search process. I would love to hear from anyone who's just watching this now. Feel free to use the chat. We're going to use it later on for some Q&A for sure, but I'd love to hear, sort of, introduce yourself. What are you up to? What are you trying to do right now in terms of career development? Are you looking for a job actively? Are you thinking about something, about a move maybe in 2022? Are you still in school? Please let me know. I would love to hear from you. And don't be afraid to also plug LinkedIn profiles if that's something that is helpful. I'm always a fan of seeing people networking in these settings. So it can be very beneficial. Really quickly, I work with people who are starting out early on in their careers in a variety of ways. I've done it professionally in an IT school here where I'm in Montreal. Now I work in a bit of a different company, and so my career coaching life is a little bit more on the sidelines. But I still produce what's now a biweekly podcast for people who are in their 20s and 30s who are serious about their career development, but aren't necessarily, they're kind of like me, hopefully, in the sense that they don't take themselves too seriously. We try and have as much fun as possible when it comes to such a serious topic like what to do with 40 or 50 hours of your week, every week for your life, a lot of your life. Please feel free to just dig into what I'm talking about. And if you want to comment on something, certainly if you have a question on something, I will take those questions at the end. But I would love it if people are able to really feel like they have a place at the virtual table as it's set here. So if you have a concern or you want me to double down on something, clarify something, don't be shy. Um, that's what we're here for. At the end of our quick talk today, you will understand the ideas of sales principles and how they apply to a job search in particular. I won't get too far into stuff that's super granular and maybe too much in the weeds, but how you can think like a salesperson, because you are a salesperson when you're in a job search. You're selling yourself. Um, Understanding the emotional process of the employer and what they are going through as they are making a buying decision when they are hiring someone. In the same way that we are buying when we buy a car, when we buy a phone, or when we buy anything that's especially a little more significant in value. And when you are employed, you carry a significant value. There's no doubt about it. We go through a very important psychological process that once we start to understand, it becomes a lot easier for us to read sort of the responses of employers that we're talking to. I'll show you a couple of tools that I use to help people organize their job searches and why this is so critical in terms of actually conserving your energy and handling rejection, which is tough in a job search, but is also par for the course, just as it is in sales. So like I said, a job search being a sales process, you are the product. And the more you can think about yourself in that way, the easier it becomes for you to sort of think about, okay, what's the language that I need to describe myself so that it's clear, my value proposition is really, really clear to the people who might be quote unquote buying me. A lot of the time, marketing collateral, personal marketing collateral, like a resume or a LinkedIn profile, is often written from the perspective of just what we think of ourselves and may not be relevant to the people who are actually on the flip side reading it and saying, okay, how can this person help me? But when you are being hired, it is because there is a problem that the employer is trying to solve. and you are that solution, that sales solution for them. Employers don't often care about things like how passionate or organized you are if you're saying these things, or that you have these crazy talents that may or may not be relevant to the business itself. What employers are trying to figure out as they go through a hiring process is uh, this really simple but elegant 3-step emotional decision process of getting to know what's out there in terms of the candidates like you, understanding whether or not you are someone that they can see themselves working with, and actually being trusted enough to do the job. So when you think about it from like a consumer standpoint, imagine yourself going to, if you had to buy a car, you were looking for a car and you know of certain models that are sort of matching the rough description of what you're looking for. Maybe it's a compact sedan, nothing too fancy, my Toyota Corolla, right? And so I know about Toyota Corollas. I like Toyota Corollas. They're just reliable. They're simple. They get the job done. Maybe what you like is, a Ferrari or an awesome SUV or something different or a bike. But there has to be a certain level of likability when you present yourself as a candidate. So employers are always gauging like how easy would it be for us to work with you, dear candidate? Because at the end of the day, we're going to assign you some work to solve the problem that the position addresses, and it's the candidate who establishes the most trust in the hiring process who typically gets the role, not necessarily the most qualified candidate. It's the person who is most trusted by the people making the hiring decision. Um, Two organizational tools. So you've maybe heard of this before from a lot of other people, and I am a big believer in the idea of having a target job list, a document of the companies and the roles that you're interested in pursuing. If you want to take this seriously, it's really, really hard to pursue all kinds of different opportunities that are just floating around in your head. The more you can pin down where you want to go and where you want to invest your time, the easier it becomes to see, okay, where exactly do I want to be prioritizing? What are the things that are becoming um, less relevant to me right now? What are the things that are most important to me? And then the actual pipeline, which I'll get into in a moment. But I mean, from a structure standpoint, a target job list can be something as simple as this Excel spreadsheet, which I often use with clients, where you're simply noting the company that you are going to look carefully at that is for some reason a company of interest, the roles, and ideally there's commonality between the roles at the different companies you're looking at. So if you're looking to be a product manager um, at a certain company, great. The other 20 companies that you're also looking at, perhaps ideally they're providing roles similar to that. So they're not, you might be saying, okay, for Acme here, if I wanted to be in sales, I'm not going to say for Betaco, I'm going to be looking at a technical role like software development. The more narrowly focused your job list is on a set of roles that are closely related, the easier it becomes for you to actually write personal marketing collateral that resonates with these people. Because saying that you are a neurosurgeon who can also fly jet planes and sells insurance on the weekends doesn't make a whole lot of sense to people. So you want there to be a sense of congruency essentially between your different targets. A lot of the time when we think about a pipeline, maybe the first thing that comes to mind, if you've never been around salespeople or marketers, is this image. Like there's a physical pipe that's moving something across the planet, and that's not what we're doing. The concept, though, of moving people through a process is what's an important takeaway here. So we'll kind of go through this a little bit more slowly. A pipeline from a sales standpoint is essentially a buyer's journey or a process where people will enter the top of the funnel or go through the beginning part of the pipeline, and not everyone is going to make it through to the other end. Um, what's interesting is that in the case of a job search, both the candidate, you and the employer is going through a sales funnel of some sort. As the candidate, you are becoming aware of opportunities that are out there, whether they are being presented to you via your network, or you see them on a job board, or you discover them through some other means. It's up to you to decide whether or not that is that opportunity going to make your target job list or not? Is it something that's really an interest of yours? And as you start to develop interest, that's when intent, things like making an application, talking to people who are in that company, starting to orient your personal marketing collateral a little bit more towards that kind of a company or that kind of a position. You go through this funnel, and the consideration phase is really similar to being basically in an interview, a series of interviews, as opposed to a sales meeting or a demo. If you want to use sales terminology, a sales demo or sales meeting is just an interview in the job search world. And then finally, there's going to be some level of decision, some stage of decision where either you are not chosen by the employer, or you are, and an offer is made. And on your side, you have the decision to make in terms of, will I accept this offer? Will I push back on it? Will I decline it? Will I negotiate it, etc.? And at the end of the day, eventually, if you keep going through this pipeline process, something is going to come through and close. But the more you use this principle, the reason for it being the way it is because it allows you to let go of certain things, certain opportunities where if an employer goes dark, if a recruiter stops talking to you, it's okay. You have a funnel filled with other opportunities that will allow you to put your time and attention back onto something that's productive and continue to make progress on your job search. Because something that I see, unfortunately, a lot, and when it comes to working with people looking for a job, is there's one big rejection from one big company of interest, and it just drains you to the point where you don't continue the search. And that's the only way to guarantee that you'll never find a job, is if you stop searching, if you stop putting in the work to run through this process. So that's it's a pretty complex little picture. If there are questions on it, I can appreciate that, and I'd love to take them at the end of the presentation. In terms of stages of a pipeline for someone who's looking for a job, you might, for example, say at the top of the funnel is you're going to identify all of these different companies that are on your radar, and you're going to add them to your target job list and start researching them. Okay, so understand maybe you have 35 companies and you bring 25 of them and you research them very thoroughly. And it's hard to conduct outreach to 25 companies at a time, but maybe you boil that down to 10 or 15 companies of focus, and you start your outreach to those target companies as a next step. You figure out that, okay, great, there's 5 to 7 companies where I can make a really good high quality application here, whether it's a hyper tailored resume or you have someone who is going to introduce you to a hiring manager. Great, let's pursue those 5 to 7 really warm leads, really warm opportunities. And then you might start going through interview processes, interview rounds, and eventually land at the offer stage. And if you do that and you feel like things aren't going well for whatever reason, some of these opportunities are dropping off the board, that's okay. You have things at the top of the funnel that can re-engage you, where you continue the process. You continue to fill the funnel with companies of interest, roles of interest, do research, build connections, etc. And this is just a streamlined way of keeping yourself moving forward. As I alluded to earlier, the idea of putting all of your eggs in one basket, or maybe just a couple of baskets as a job seeker, it's very, very common. As hard as I try and press on clients to provide a broad list of companies that feature the roles that they're most interested in, that are companies that match maybe their value systems, that are appealing to them for a variety of ways, a lot of the time people get stuck up on 1, 2, or 3 things, and they put a lot of time into just those 1, 2, or 3 things. And it's just a devastating thing when one of those opportunities where you've spent most of your time on falls through or gets delayed into another hiring cycle. to have the job seeker end up basically not continuing is the worst possible situation that can happen. Understanding where different companies are and where you're at with them in the job search process and the sales cycle is critical, because the faster something is moving, the more engaged an employer is with you and you are with them, the warmer that opportunity is, the more you can just focus your time on trying to close those opportunities. And when I say close, it means let's get to an offer stage, let's potentially get a job signed, versus as opposed to treating everybody the same and saying, okay, I'm just going to throw my effort all around and maybe not have as high quality of an approach with the employers that are most relevant in the moment. As the top of that funnel starts to dry out for whatever reason, you have the ability to refill it. You have the ability to go back out to a job board and see, okay, what is out there? What can I research? And it provides confidence knowing that, okay, there are jobs out there for me. And there for sure are. If you have to expand the funnel a little bit, or you have to create a bit of a pivot in terms of what you're targeting. I was working with someone earlier this year who was trying to get into a very niche segment of cybersecurity, for example. And ultimately, we determined from her past experience and current skills that she could actually open the funnel up to project management type roles. That brought new opportunities into her funnel, which actually went through the process pretty quickly. And she landed one opportunity with another employer coming in after that and saying, would you consider us as well? And so it's amazing how just when we think there are no opportunities out there, if we alter the top of the funnel a little bit and start to fill it with new opportunities, that all kinds of things can happen at the bottom of the funnel when people are interviewing us. Job search being so time and energy consuming, I think this is one of the best things that a job seeker can do, because it allows you to have a sense of control over a process, which can sometimes feel like it's out of your control, like it's almost victimizing in some ways. I want to use that term carefully, but the more you can take command of what you are doing and directing your time and energy, the more confidence you have in your job search, which shows up in the way that you write emails to employers, speak to people over the phone, have interviews, write resumes, all of it, the way you negotiate for yourself and advocate. So a key step in terms of building a better job search comes down to whether or not you are using some kind of organizational concept like a pipeline, target job lists, etc. And I would love to pause in just a moment and take questions on what I've spoken about. If you want to connect with me on this further, if I can't quite get to your question today, I'd be happy to chat with you. You can find me on LinkedIn pretty easily. I'm just linkedin.com/in/birdmike. Podcast, as I mentioned, and it's called the Career Builders Podcast, which you can find on just about any major podcasting platform, or you can go to careerbuilderspodcast.com. If reaching out to people on LinkedIn is something that is a bit of a challenge for you, then feel free to go to my website and you can actually find a 5-day e-course that just comes in free to your inbox and allows you to understand how you can actually build connections with people who can advance your job search. You can always reach me by email, mike@coachoiseau.com, or subscribe to my weekly mailing. So with all that being said, I would love to see if there are any questions in the time that we've got left. Got 5-ish minutes. And I'm also looking in the chat and seeing some really different roles here, or different ambitions here. Hubert looking for new opportunities in IT and finance domains, or in sales support roles, multi-skilled with engineering and management background. Beautiful. Bank jobs applied, so many, but really not working, as I have no prior experience in banking. Really wanted to get into entry-level bank jobs. Yes, that is one of the biggest challenges right now in the market today, is for a lot of people who see these entry-level roles that say, I need 3 years of experience. And just because the employer is asking for that doesn't mean they're going to get it. So think about that. And also think about who might be struggling to find talent, because there are always employers that are struggling to find talent. Looking for aerospace jobs. Any questions at all about what I've talked about? Or did I, even when you build a pipeline, you start analyzing the gaps and try to learn quickly? Yes. How do you adapt to the gaps? Okay, great. Yeah. So, for example, that's a great question. Thank you. Sit. Yeah. Love the analysis part of that. So, let's say you have a list of target jobs and you say, okay, I'm going to, send out my applications to these 5 or 6 companies this week. They're going to be of very high quality. And for whatever reason, um, oh, thank you, Sandra. I also see that in the Q&A section. Appreciate that. So let's say that you are applying to these jobs and you are not hearing anything from that set of employers that you've targeted very carefully. Okay. And there's no response for whatever reason. So go back to those 5 or 6 groups, that the group of 5 or 6 applications that you made, compare them to the job description. That's actually, they're giving away a lot of the answers in terms of what they're looking for and what needs to be in your either your resume or your LinkedIn profile. And I'm not saying copy the job description into your resume, but see, like, how closely am I tailoring my resume to what they're really looking for, or how can I tell a story that answers to some of the qualifications that they're looking for? That would be one example that comes to mind. I want to also see if I can hit some of these questions really quickly. How do you best prep for interviews? I mean, long story short, it would be about understanding the person who's interviewing you, check their LinkedIn profile, understand the position as much as possible and the problems that it solves for the company and even the company and the sector that you're looking at. That's the broad answer. It'd be hard for me to give one that's really highly in depth. How to secure an aerospace engineer jobs. I am from India. I mean, yeah, like I just said, Venkatesh, it's take a look and see what is being looked for in the job description. Realize that you might not have everything that they're asking for, and that's okay. How can you answer the most critical parts of that with your past experience? And how can you build connections in the companies that you are interested in? That's the big part, is how can you find advocates in the companies that you want to work for, who can say, you know what, I really have enjoyed meeting you and I can see that you have some skills. Let me put you in touch with the hiring manager. And I think my dog just woke up from a nap. Even when you build a pipeline. Okay, perfect. Sorry, I see Sit's question again. Anything else? I will just go back to the chat. Yeah, you're very welcome, Sit. Thank you. Oh, good timing for my dog. I'm so sorry, everyone. How do you find jobs in Canada from the outside? Ideally, if you have people who are in Canada who are in the places that you'd like to work at, it's probably the hardest kind of job search, coming from another country and trying to land and establish your career. I've never experienced that, but I know a lot of people who have from my work. And the more you can find people who have done what you are doing, so people who are already in Canada, maybe they come from the same country as you, they speak a similar language or the same language, maybe they're in the same sector. The more you can talk to people who have walked the journey that you are walking through now, the easier it gets. It's not a silver bullet answer that I just gave you, Vinod, but find out from people who've ultimately done what you're trying to do, because they will have not only the most insight in terms of how to be successful, they'll have the most empathy. They will be the people who want to help you the most. We all want to, not all, but a lot of the time we want to help people who are a lot like us, and feel free to leverage that as much as you can. Humans tend to want to be helpful. What if they say you were overqualified for the position you applied for? Yeah. So, I mean, that is basically a statement around a concern that you might not stick around in the company for very long. So they're concerned that, maybe after a year you'll get really bored in the role and you'll go and do something else. And maybe the way that there's a couple of things you can do. One is you don't talk so much to your overqualification. Um, Try and minimize it to a certain extent. If you know exactly what it is, maybe the PhD that you have is throwing people off on the hiring side. Maybe you really move education further and further away from the top of your CV. But the other side is, can you talk about how you can actually help the company grow with your skill set, or help the department that you're applying for be more efficient or more effective? Create a bigger position for yourself, or discuss how you will add extra value if you're hired, and that may not come at a major additional cost for the employer. Cool. Thanks, Sandra. I appreciate the yes. I will keep answering if there are any questions. This has been a very lively group. I appreciate it. Let me just see here. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome, Lee. I'm not sure if I pronounced that properly. Let me just see if there are any questions in the Q&A. Been kind of bouncing back and forth. I've really appreciated that. If you're being approached by a job seeker on LinkedIn, what would you say would be the ideal message outline? So are you saying, this is Hajra's question, like if you're approaching someone, or approaching an employer, or if you're approached by someone who's looking for a job? Not too sure I understand the question. So if Hajra, if you want to try and clarify that, I'd love to try and answer that question. Messaging a recruiter. Oh, okay. Okay. So understanding what the recruiter is recruiting for in a perfect world. Sometimes recruiters post the roles that they are really looking for right now. Understanding that recruiters don't recruit for all jobs, but if they are recruiting for a position that you would be highly qualified for, they would love to probably take a look at your resume. And it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get them on board and get you moving towards an interview. But knowing who you're going after is really, really critical. So something you might say is, hi, Bob, the recruiter. I see that you posted, or that you typically recruit for engineers in the aerospace sector. I'm an aerospace engineer with 5 years of experience. Would you be open to taking a look at my CV? And in the 300 characters that you have on LinkedIn, that's probably about as good as you can do. But feel free to play with those kinds of messages and see which ones work. But remember that recruiters get a lot of those messages, so be persistent. I'm actively looking for opportunities in chemistry in Canada. Cool. As I know, in Canada, chemists and chemical engineers are in demand, and the government assists employers. Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you can maybe slide into an area of the economy where there is demand and the government is trying to get people into those sectors, then maybe that's something that will accelerate your job search process, for sure. For sure. Profit driven. Yeah, absolutely. So Lee's just talking about the fact that, yeah, employers are trying to reduce risk as much as possible in the hiring process, because hiring is super expensive. If you go through a recruiter, that might be $10, $15, $20,000 in recruitment contingency fees. And if you, after a year, that person walks away, now you have to go out and find someone all over again. And that can be really, really tough. Hajra, I'm glad that was helpful. I'm going to have to stop in the essence of respecting the next presenter's time, but I have really, really enjoyed this sort of rapid fire Q&A session. It's much appreciated. If I didn't answer your question, or something comes to mind a little bit later on, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. But otherwise, I wish all of you an amazing, amazing time in your career transition. It can be tough, there's no doubt, but it can also be the beginning of something that's really, really new and important. So cool. Sam, I'll see if I can take your question. Last one here. Accountant in my home country. It's very difficult to get hired as an accountant. I've gotten hired as a sales in Rogers, but the pandemic started. Now looking for an accounting job. Any clue how to get an accounting job? Yeah. So, I mean, have you been able to meet some people who are accountants currently in the time that you've been here? And if not, then now's the time to start. Is there a qualification aspect to it that's a problem? Do you need to sit an exam that's unique to Canada versus your home country? So look at that as well. It can be really, really tough. There's no doubt, and I think we are probably too hard on people who have to requalify coming from other countries. It's not like skills disappear when you cross borders. But those are the two things. Look at your qualifications and see how tightly they match the current market standards, and see who you can meet who's an accountant here. And even better, meet an accountant who maybe is from your home country, um, who has landed work here as an accountant, and see what they did. Cool. I am going to sign off and let all of you transition over to the next session. I wish you the very best and good luck.